There's the next phase where you become the entrepreneur. This is where you learn to leverage what you've learned and actually make it profitable. But then as you grow, what you quickly realize is there's the third component, which is leadership. And the leadership is actually the hardest one, and it has nothing to do with the other two.
When it comes to leadership, I think it's one of those things that when you ask different, doctors, how do you define that? You're going to get a lot of different answers. We know that they spend their time in dental school specifying their clinical skills, and that's important. But if you're going to be in the business world, and especially if you're going to scale from, 5 locations to 100 or whatever your plan is, then in order to make that plan come to fruition is going to take the action and the leadership that you are going to either need to have or you currently have to be able to make that happen.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Go. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help level the playing field so you can compete against the monster DSOs out there that are gobbling up all the new patients, and so you can grow the way that you want. But you can't grow if you don't know how to lead your team. And today I have Lynne, who's the founder and CEO of Victory Dental Management, and she's going to be breaking down how she has created a formula to help dentists just like you be able to lead their teams effectively and avoid burnout. And at the end of the day, it really boils down to her background in coaching, and she's been in the dental industry for many, many years. This is going to be a really cool episode, especially if you like basketball. Stay tuned. All right, we are live, and I'm excited to have Lynne here today. And Lynne is a basketball fan and used to be a basketball coach, and so am I. And so this is going to be a really, really fun show. But don't worry, it's not about basketball. We're going to be talking about a lot of dental stuff. And Lynne, you have worked with a lot of practices and you help them. And I'm really, really interested in your answer to this. What's the number one thing right now that you're seeing that's helping dental offices grow?
Right now, I would say with the issues that we have with team members either staying or leaving and all of the shrinking of our workforce in the industry, I would say culture is the number one thing. But let me expound upon that a little bit.
Please do.
And I know that was like a lot, but I will also say I'm still coaching basketball. So I'm 30 years plus as a basketball coach, just to correct the record, just to let that know. But for me, I define culture. And I think, Gary, that we really overcomplicate stuff that we don't need to overcomplicate. And culture is one of those things that I find that we tend to overcomplicate, because the way that I describe it or define it really is what is acceptable or unacceptable when it comes to human behavior. Because at its essence, that's what culture is. That's what's going to trip people up. That's what's going to say, Lynne, I hired so-and-so at the front. Why can't they just do what I hire them to do? It really is a culture question.
You've probably noticed this before, but this podcast is unsponsored. What that means is we don't get paid to do it, but we want to bring you the best information possible. So how do we make sure that this content stays on the air? We need you to like and subscribe. Wherever you're at, whatever you're listening on, just give us a thumbs up or subscribe, and that helps us out so much. I know that you probably haven't done it, so I'm just going to sit here and wait until you do. 95% of our listeners have not subscribed to our podcast. So go ahead and do it now. Don't make this awkward. All right, good. Back to the show. Yeah. Performance is a culture question. One of the things that I find most interesting about culture is, and that the part that people mostly miss, and I'm sure you're not this way because you're in basketball, is that part of a winning culture is winning, right? Like that's what it is. And we sometimes we leave that out. I used to think that like culture was like this warm and fuzzy thing that just people talked about to sell books. But in reality, it's creating an environment that your team can win together. And then it's defining what that winning is. So I'm interested. What are your thoughts about that when it comes to like culture and winning?
I think you have to prepare to win. Everybody wants to win, because I don't know a lot of people that say, yay, I lost, or yay, I'm a loser. I don't hear that. I don't know about you, but I don't hear that. But the problem comes in, I hear doctors all the time and see them prepare so much on the clinical aspect of their practice and what they're doing for their patients, what, individual cases that they're preparing. But I don't see them as a business owner prepare to win. And what I mean by that is the leader is supposed to calm the chaos. If you're going to be the head coach of your team, that takes advantage of something that the dentist already does naturally, which is education of their patients and encouragement of their patients. What I teach is for them to turn it inward and to coach their team and learn how to actually coach.
Which is a missing skill. I talk about this a lot, and so my audience will be familiar with it. But there's a couple stages. I actually got this from E-Myth Revisited, where first you have to become an expert at doing the thing. They call it the technician. For me, it was marketing. For our audience, a lot of our audience, it was doing dentistry, being really, really good at doing dentistry. And you just like laser focus on that. And that's all that you really focus on. But then there's the next phase where you become the entrepreneur. This is where you learn to leverage what you've learned and actually make it profitable, not just as an employee or as an associate, or not just as a guy that's just like running marketing for a couple dental practices, but where you actually learn to do it at a little bit of a bigger scale. But then as you grow, what you quickly realize is there's the third component, which is leadership. And the leadership is actually the hardest one, and it has nothing to do with the other two. Being amazing at being a dentist or an entrepreneur actually has really not a lot to do with being an amazing leader. It's a complete different skill set. I would equate it to just because you're good at basketball, aka Michael Jordan, doesn't mean you can run a successful basketball club. Two different skill sets. How do you kind of break that down or view that?
I view it from a very similar standpoint, because when it comes to leadership, I think it's one of those things that when you ask different, doctors, how do you define that? You're going to get a lot of different answers. We know that they spend their time in dental school specifying their clinical skills, and that's important. But if you're going to be in the business world, and especially if you're going to scale from, 5 locations to 100 or whatever your plan is, then in order to make that plan come to fruition is going to take the action and the leadership that you are going to either need to have or you currently have to be able to make that happen. Because if things are not good in a 5 location practice, they're going to be horrible as you scale, because that's just the nature of the beast.
It's called scaling chaos,
exactly.
is what I call that, right? And so it's like, hey, everything's really rocky right now. Just add a couple more practices or a couple more people and see how much worse it gets. So how do you actually help people with this? How do you, first of all, do dentists realize that this is an issue as you're working with them? And then second, how do you actually work them through to make them better at being that leader?
That's a good question. If they're working with me, they realize that they are lacking that skill. Or after our conversation, they realize, hey, there's an easier way to understand leadership, because they just think they don't have boundaries. If you're doing something clinical, there are boundaries. You know the procedures that you need to do, the steps that you need to do, tasks for those procedures. The problem is when we're coming with leadership and dealing with human beings, there's no boundaries with that. So teaching them how to be the head coach of their team gives them the boundaries, gives them the framework to take something that they're really lacking, because once they have those boundaries, they take off. My clients are extremely successful when it comes to the non-clinical stuff, because I'm not a clinical coach. I'm a non-clinical coach. And that's where I love to help, because when they realize, what does it take to be a coach? Because, gone are the days of being the dictator saying, well, I told you to do this and you do this.
Yeah.
You want to know why people are leaving your practice, doctor? There you go. Not gonna. I can't sugarcoat that.
And you can't pretend like this isn't an issue anymore, because also gone are the days that you put a job offer up on Indeed and you just have a flood of people lining up there. Like, you are competing, especially for hygienists and dental assistants. Dentists are a little bit more tricky because they can't just leave dentistry so easy. But dental hygienists and dental assistants can just leave the industry. They can go work for a marketing company. They can work for a SaaS company. They can go work for a multitude of different companies out there and be compensated similar and work from home. And so it's like, and they can go work for your competitor right down the street as well. So like, it's such a rocky road. And you can't just say, we'll hire somebody else to fill that role. You run out of options pretty quickly. And I think people are starting to realize that.
Yeah, I hope they are, because that's what's happening within the industry. If they want to stay in dentistry, they are looking for the doctor and the team that had their act together. And when I say had their act together, they've thought about this. They've done the planning. It takes time, Gary, as you know, to be able to do all of that planning and to be able to have the non-clinical stuff set up. And that's what they're searching for. Because I talk to assistants and office managers and hygienists all the time about, what is it that I should be looking for? Because they follow me on social media and they know my philosophy about certain things. And they say, I just wish the doctor would view me as, ... Well, this is what you're looking for. Because if you've already thought, let me give an example. If you've got practices that are all patient-centric, which I believe in. We're all there to serve the patient. If we're not serving the patient, then why are we there? Honestly. So
Yeah.
if we start with that, then we want them to have the best experience they possibly can have. And that involves a lot of different things. But overall, how do you keep the team motivated, focused on the goals that the doctor has? Because the doctor can sit there and say, here are my goals. Well, are they real goals? Are they actionable goals? And why did you pick those goals? Is the team on board with that? Have you done all the work with the team that you need? Because those that have gotten the culture, what those behaviors that are acceptable or unacceptable, all put together, then they're going to fight to keep the people that they have on the team. And people are not going to leave for 25, 50 cents or even $1 more per hour because they can predict their work day. They know when they get there what they're going to face. They get there on time. They have lunch. They leave on time. That predictability takes out the equation of the drama that comes into what am I going to face when I walk in. Nobody likes that, whether you're the dentist owner or whether you're the associate, hygienist, whatever role you play, nobody likes that. So why not do the work on the front end so that you can avoid all of that?
Yeah. What's funny is that so often we think this is a money problem, right? If we just pay people more, then they'll stay. The problem is that only works for people who are newer to the industry, right? Or newer to working and figuring this out. They will leave for more money, or you can attract them with more money because they're like, yeah, you're going to give me a better title, more money. But once somebody's worked in a bad environment, they know how to avoid those in the future, and they're willing to actually take less money. I've actually had people on my team that have left. Multiple people on my team that were like, we got a better opportunity. And I was like, hey, God bless you. Wish you nothing but the best. And then after about 6 months to a year, they come back and they're like, hey, it wasn't what I thought it was. I kind of liked, because we put a ton of energy into culture in our company, a ton of energy. Like it's one of our priorities. And they come back and they say, hey, it wasn't what I thought it was. Can you touch on that a little bit? I'm sure you deal with that a lot, where people are just like, let's just throw money at the problem.
Oh, sure. Well, they think if I have all the money in the world and that's going to solve every issue, why don't I love the one. Why don't we put in a bonus structure? You're throwing money after bad to be able to just take a step and go, what is it that we've created? What kind of environment do we want? And it doesn't take a lot to be able to create that environment that you're looking for. It's just, you got to know the playbook. You got to know how to put this together. And, you got to start at the basics. You got to know what your mission is. You got to know what your vision is. And I define those a little differently than most. This is not your 80s, mission and vision stuff. But you need to know your core values, because all of that, what it's really doing, Gary, is bringing everybody together that believes in it. If somebody's working for you and they don't believe in it, then they need to go. Because if that's what you want in your practice, you make it very obvious. This is what I'm looking for. This is what we're striving to do. This is what we believe in. And you create it as a team. When you create it as a team, nobody can say, oh, well, I didn't have my voice heard. Yeah, you did. And now you're a part of it. So we're either going to go forward together, which is the goal. And it may take some small steps to get there. But the fact that you're either growing or you're going backwards. Stagnation is not something that I look at. We're either growing or you're failing. And it's okay to fail. You really learn a lot when you fail, because then you learn, what did I do that didn't work so I don't do it again? But the problem is we don't take enough time to sit back and go, okay, what didn't work? What did work? Because we're so busy. And I kind of hand it to dentists. They are going back and forth and transitioning between their operatory, hygienists, back to their operatory. That takes a lot of mental energy. It really does. But then you add that layer of, at the end of the day, they are physically tired, because dentistry is tiring work. I always tell my dentists, make sure you have good nutrition and you work out, because that's the demand of the job. But then after that, they've got to be the owner. So it all comes together, and you've got to know how to be able to take it apart and put it back together so that it eases the burden of everybody involved.
Yeah, 100%. It's so funny. I was kind of smiling because our company Y is always growing, and something we say often is, you're either growing or you're dying. One thing that I find interesting about growth too is, like, and we talk about this a lot, is growth is something that should make you uncomfortable, right? Like, I've never worked out before and wanted to lift more weights and wasn't uncomfortable about it. I never got better at basketball and wasn't uncomfortable in the process. It should be uncomfortable, and there has to be a level of urgency attached to it. It's so easy to say someday I'm going to have a really good jumper, or someday I'm going to travel the world, or someday I'm going to get to 100 offices. Anybody can say that. Where it gets really tricky is when you go, in the next 12 months, we're going to be adding 3 more locations. That all of a sudden, you just get like tons of pressure put on you. So it's like urgency, and which is time, right? Urgency is created by time, and being uncomfortable. Do you see growth in a similar sense?
Absolutely. Because until you put a timeline to it, it's just a thought. It's not an action plan. And it goes back to, you've got to prepare to win. All of these things that we've talked about and more that I haven't even mentioned, it all comes back to, how do you prepare to win? What do you do in what order to be able to do that? I mean, because it's just like a basketball team. My patience for the little ones that are still trying to learn how to dribble, I'm not that patient anymore. I gotta be honest. Not when I've been coaching my AAU teams and I'm getting my girls college scholarships. Really don't have the patience to teach somebody how to dribble, and God forbid, look down when they're dribbling. You know what I'm saying? So I'd much rather work on the higher end skills, on the rest of what does a well-rounded basketball player look like, or a well-rounded dental team look like. It's really the same thing in my mind, back and forth. It's just, what's the vocabulary we're going to use, but the goal is still the same. If we want to win, you got to know who your competition is, and half the time it's the person staring at you in the mirror. That's your competition, depending on how you're looking at things. Now, I love competition. I thrive off of it because to me, it's an internal discipline thing. But competition can be defined a lot of different ways, just like success can be defined a lot of different ways. It just depends on your perspective and what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's true. You know, dentistry, and I'm sure you've realized this being in the dental industry for some time now, is like, there's a lot of fixed mindsets in dentistry, meaning let's pretend you're a Dr. Lynn and I'm a doctor, and I go, well, if Dr. Lynn is getting 100 patients a month, that means I'm losing. And it's like, I deal with this all the time.
I'm sure you do.
Constantly. And I'm just like, no, actually it doesn't. Actually, Dr. Lynn could have all the patients in the world, and so could you, and everybody eats and everybody's happy. Like, why does Dr. Lynn winning mean you're losing? We're not playing a binary game like basketball, where there's a winner and a loser at the end because there's a scoreboard. We're playing an infinite game where you can win on all kinds of fronts, just like what you noted. And it's really in how you define what winning is to you. Is winning having a flexible life? Is winning having a bunch of money in your bank account? Is winning having patients cry at the end of the treatment? Like, what is winning to you? And how do you define that? And so often dentistry, I don't know what it is about dentistry that makes it this way. It's just this fixed mindset that people get stuck in.
Completely agree. And it's like, it's either black or white. I'm like, no. We can look at the problem a lot of different ways. It's just like math or calculus. There are different ways that you can do the math problem and still get the same answer. And there's different tracks to be able to get to that. But how do our respective clients get to that point to where they realize, hey, this is what winning means to me. This is what success looks like for me. But I don't know if they've gotten to the point that they've allowed themselves just time to think, because time to reflect and think about what you want, and then decide, that's the macro viewpoint, and then decide the micro of what do we do underneath to support those goals? How do we get there? That's the action plan. Or in my world, the game plan. What are we going to do to institute to be able to get to where you want to go? But if you don't know where you want to go, then you're spinning. Are you growing?
And then you're depressed. And then, even when you get there, you're like, you don't, like, again, using the example of the other doctor winning, like, they don't even know you're competing against them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, you're playing a game with yourself that's unwinnable. And then you wonder why you feel burned out. You feel depressed. You feel sad. You know what I mean? It's like, well, yeah, because you're playing an unwinnable game. Question for you, it's kind of changing gears on you. How did you, so you went from basketball, how'd you get into dental? Like, why dental? Did you, like, I'm sitting here having these great thoughts about you and like thinking about basketball and how it correlates. But then I'm like, wait a second, why did you get into dental?
Basketball has always been a hobby outside of my profession. So that's been an additional thing. But if I have not coached on the college level, but if I got that opportunity, I would always take it. To answer your question, I started academically after I graduated from school in transportation logistics. And then I started in the medical practices and running pharmacies and then into dental. But how I got into dental was my best friend, her husband is a general dentist. And she's like, listen, you've got a business background. I need you to come run the practice. I said, great. He can teach me dentistry. I'll teach him business. And that was the first job I've ever had that I used my 5 years of Latin. It was awesome.
That's so cool. Well, Lynne, this has been really, really good. I've really enjoyed talking with you. I can tell that you have your stuff together. You're no nonsense and very straightforward. And I can tell that there's a lot of crossover. And I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time. But if somebody else is like, you know what, I actually want to learn how to be a leader and I want to do it the right way so that way I can grow without chaos in my life, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, the best way to get in touch with me is go to my website, which is victorydentalmanagement.com. But I want to go back to something you mentioned real quick about burnout. I have realized in the dental industry that we have been suffering with that for quite a while. So I actually created a 3-month coaching program that's custom to the client to be able to work with them on burnout. So if anybody, you don't need to suffer alone anymore if anybody's got burnout issues.
Everybody's burning out, right? I care about it all the time.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I really, really appreciate you coming on. You did a great job. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me.